So I guess let's start with the Texas Monthly article and what made you want to dive into this, because this is a very serious subject. It's a crazy subject. What happened with just all the people involved? I mean, this is something that affects so many people. What inspired Johnny you to tackle this and get Mr. Mater over there involved and
Well, no, it was Barrett Barrett, he read that article, I think, when it first came out. And he sent it to me pretty early on. I don't know, he probably did the same.
3 years ago.
Yeah, at least. And it was just a topic of conversation that would come up anytime, I was living overseas, but anytime we had a chance to talk about the projects that we were working on or thinking about, this would inevitably come up. And it's, if you read that article, it's just fascinating, So as a storyteller, it's, it's addictive, you want to try, but it's also super ambitious to consider taking on that size of a story. So yeah, it was Barrett's sort of vision for it that brought me here.
When Barrett first brought it to you, did that kind of pseudo documentary style, was that his image that he wanted to have actors come in and have that type of thing, or did y'all start out maybe as a documentary feel?
He would call and he'd talk about how he might be able to treat it. I think initially it's like, well, maybe it's a straight doc, but even when he would bring it up, maybe I could do it as a doc, it was always with like, that's really not good enough, and we'd talk about films that we both liked, like how did they handle this sort of thing. Obviously the Kiarostami thing came up, but also Medium Cool, and there's a lot of sort of fascinating films that kind of tackle the fact and fiction thing in an interesting way. And so once Barrett sort of settled on that, I jumped on board.
Yeah, when I first saw it, I thought Medium Cool kind of, the elements popped into my head. I thought there's very big similarities there.
Yeah.
When it came to casting these wonderful people...
Wait, can I chime in on the answer to that?
Sure, yeah.
So, I read the article and it was probably 3 years ago, and then Barrett was, he was kind of still trying to figure it out. But when we actually did shoot the movie, we shot it in two parts. We shot the documentary aspects of the movie first. And I think that gave you guys a chance to kind of assess everything, figure out, because you always knew it was going to be a hybrid narrative and documentary. And I think you guys we shot first for 3 weeks, and then you guys spent probably 6 months kind of writing a script based on all the documentary stuff. And that's when it was decided to bring Maria's character in and whatnot. Yeah.
As we were trying to understand all the documentary footage and doing more research. So it was kind of this huge process where we were trying to write, research, and sort of, I guess, assimilate all that information and revelation.
But that's what, for me, that's what was fascinating, was like we kind of made two movies. We'd make the documentary first, 6 months later, 8 months later, a year later, I can't remember how long it was, we made the narrative aspect based on the documentary footage, which was really interesting, and weaving them all together. It was really fascinating.
Well,
but it's true that what he said, that we had two movies, but we always wanted to stay truthful to the narrative story should not overcome the documentary story. And what was really important, that these two talented, amazing people, Barrett and Johnny, they prove that it's not just the talent, it's also so much work behind that to put all these pieces together. And then whereas there's so much preparations, everything worked out, and it allowed us to play with our characters and try to serve the story and do as much as we could to help it.
Can y'all talk a little bit about that, the relationship y'all have in the movie, and that is really where I think y'all shine, is that connection. Is that what you were trying to concentrate, since you knew Johnny and Barrett had all the documentary side finished and done?
Well, it wasn't all finished, because we actually, once we went back to do the narrative stuff, there was a lot more documentary stuff that was weaved in. Like Maria's character has to actually interview Patrick Kelly, the titular character. Is that how you say it, titular? The title character, Booger Red? How do you say that? How do you say that word? No, titular, right? I shouldn't use that word if I don't know how to, if I don't know what it means and I don't know how to say it. Maria actually interviews like Booger Red's son in the movie, so there's still the aspect. So I was kind of wrong. We did most of the documentary stuff, and then came back and did the narrative stuff, but also more documentary stuff. But our characters, I guess we represent I think that Barrett wanted to justify my character, the journalist, obsession with this case, to me, which is really, really interesting. It's like, I always question why Barrett was so fascinated by the case. And, there's Michael Hall, who wrote the original kind of Texas Monthly article. Where was his obsession? I think it's just so strange because it's such a breach of justice. And it's just like, it's so alarming because it's so obvious that the people who went to prison, the 6 people, they couldn't have done what they were accused of. So, I mean, there's that. Anybody who's naturally curious, like Barrett is, and I guess Michael Hall, who's a journalist, like would gravitate towards something like this. But I think we represent the dark side of, like, I think why the justification for why this character wants to pursue this thing. I think it was really interesting and a clever way to weave in my character, who is based on me, not based on me, like my name's Orner Tukel, although I'm not a journalist, but I'm very inquisitive, I guess, We could easily talk for 4 hours, probably like Harry Knowles did, if we had that kind of time, but we wouldn't want to do that shit. We don't want to do that. I can't curse, probably. It doesn't really matter. I guess it's fine. So, anyway... So I'm rambling so much about, we represent, I think, the connection to, I think, the viewer, to allow the viewer who maybe isn't normally used to watching a documentary, how can they take the journey along with us? And I think that's what our relationship kind of represents, is this kind of connection to something, a humanity that the characters possess, that allows the audience to take That's so pretentious what I'm saying right now, but you answer it, Maria. It's hard. Barrett, why don't you come here and answer this damn question?
Yeah, it's true. We just, that was brilliant. We just try to explain our characters and how the story, to cover the curiosity of his character, of a journalist, why he's exploring the story, and to cover also my backup story for my character. Why do I get involved with that case? Yeah. But we also were also aware of the true story and about the documentary side, that we didn't want to do too much and to overcomplicate it, because they really wrote a deep characters for both of us. And we tried to do very little, not to make it too complicated, so the documentary part doesn't get
overshadowed.
Yes.
I'm curious, with your TV experience, or with your acting experience, did you approach this knowing that it's going to be different? It's going to be something completely different from what you guys have done. Did you approach it as actors differently, or did you go into it, I've got to do it the same way I've always done it? And I'll give you that.
Do you want to go first? Well, you're a skilled actor. You actually have you're a talented actress, and you have a skill set to go to. There's so many moments. I can't remember. I remember in a few takes where you cried at the airport scene. You had tears. Like, just the ability to do that, the technical prowess that you have, which is completely outside of my ability as an actor. So I approach it the way I always do, which is, I'm trusting Barrett. He's directing me, which is somewhere between learning scripted dialogue and improvisation. You know what I mean? I don't consider myself an actor. I consider myself a performer of my own personality, and I think that's why Barrett cast me, is that I'm inquisitive. I talk a lot. I have a kind of demeanor that's off-putting, it's down to earth, that will like make people feel comfortable. I think that's part of the method of casting me. Part of the strategy was that even though we're approaching very serious subject matter, I could maybe find a way to make everyone feel like they can be themselves. You know what I mean? So I never really necessarily felt like I was acting during the documentary things. And with Maria, I was very intimidated because, again, you're very experienced and you're quite well known in Serbia as an actress there. So I was nervous, but again, you had the effect on me, which is you're very down to earth, and you made me feel comfortable. So it was always, I think that's part of the big. And Barrett's so great too, because he was very, very specific about what he wanted. But I think a big job of a director is to make people feel comfortable, where they can be themselves and not be self-conscious. And I felt like he did a good job managing us and directing us. Again, the whole crew, it was like a family. So I never felt like, even though I was intimidated initially, just this team of just 15 people behind the camera, and we're going into some dark territory, and we're in Tyler, Texas, and Mineola, Texas, where there's this kind of underbelly of like, something bad took place here, and not in terms of what the defendants did, but with the judicial system there, and with the prosecutors, and the political motivations behind what the prosecutors did, and what and Margie Cantrell, who's kind of the villain of the thing, like this nefarious kind of what's her motivation. So we were kind of like, we were playing journalists as we were doing it, but the whole time I was conduit for Barrett and Johnny, and then when Maria was there, that we were kind of actors. It was exciting and fun and thrilling. I didn't change. I don't have a skill set. So it's like, again, I'm just being myself and then taking direction when Baron's giving it to me. You know what I mean? God, I could talk about it for a long time.
Yeah, you were very open about listening and curious, and what he has, his endless improvisations and like talent to give endless ideas, and probably my skills and experience like were a good blend. And he was always curious, and that scene at the airport, like you were a really great partner there, and you really helped me to make it the way it is today in a cut. And of course we had Bernd and Johnny who were on top of everything, so they were like helping us to feel confident and comfortable. But for me as an actress was really the most challenging part was these are real characters. It really happened to them. And I'm supposed to be in my character and ask them something which is probably the hardest thing that happened to them in their lives. And I'm poking it. And we're actually there in their lives, in their houses. And I was just, I was afraid I'm gonna just touch something that I'm not supposed to, and just didn't want to hurt them at all. That was challenging.
To piggyback off that, Johnny, when you and Barrett were getting back into this case and diving into it, obviously Michael had done that too, but going out there, being there with these people, what were the experiences that you guys had to go through to accomplish this movie? Because it does seem like you could get some backlash, you could get some really weird reactions, you're unearthing something that's very deep-seated in East Texas communities.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it was a challenge initially. You have to go through a trust-building process, especially with the defendants. They have every reason to be suspicious of us. So, once we went through that process where we were earnest, we were very transparent and forthright about what our intentions were, all of the defendants jumped on board. And I think, by the end of the process, we're very eager and happy to tell their story. And I think, it was the same for the lawyers. I think once they figured out what we were trying to do, they were willing to open up. Not so much with the prosecution side of things. We did get to talk to them, and Barrett talked on a couple of occasions with Margie Cantrell, but they were never comfortable enough to go on the record, so to speak.
What were some of those? Because we don't get to see that obviously in the film. What was their response to you guys in doing this? I mean, how did they react, especially her?
Well, I'm not sure. I think they're trying to feel us out and figure out what we were trying to do, and I think, initially we went into this, we weren't. If you read Michael Hall's article, he's just kind of shining a light on a lot of strange things that are going on. He's not drawing a lot of conclusions, and I think that's the attitude that Barrett and I sort of took into that process. It's like we weren't at that time when we started. There was still this sort of feeling that maybe there's a small chance that these allegations are actually true, and we're standing on shaky ground. But as we learned more, as we did more research, we became more assured at some of the maybe conclusions that we drew by the end of the process. Yeah.
Can I chime in on that?
Sure. Yeah,
Am I talking too much? Is
No,
this too
no.
much? Baron, am I talking too much? Okay. There was an expectation going into Texas and Tyler, Mineola. I'm from North Carolina, a small town in North Carolina, so I would never say disparaging things about like small rural places in the South, although people tend to do that. But there is an expectation going there, and I was very bearded. I looked like this hippie Arab. Well, I was a hippie Arab going in there, so we would make jokes about like, watch your back, whenever you have a big mouth and don't like, and Barrett's got a bigger mouth than I do too, but he's got to be the kind of the paternal Papa Bear who's like directing the movie. So of course, so there was this expectation of like, just be careful because this is touchy subject matter, and there is a sense that it's a dangerous area based on the fact that this case even happened. The fact that there could be not the people, not the denizens, but in the political structure and the people high up. If they could put 6 people away that were so innocent, obviously didn't do something, they could make our lives hell too and arrest us maybe. So I remember there being that sense of suspense and being like cautious. And
and feeling like that at some point. I mean, at some point when we were up in Tyler, a sense of paranoia set in, and I know throughout this process, we were trying to work into the narrative all the sort of experiences that Barrett and I had gone through while researching, being up in Tyler. You'll find little elements of that throughout the film, like there's that small sort of little section where owner thinks he's getting followed.
Right. Yeah. Did you write that in there as we were shooting? Was it already always part of the script?
No, we wrote that in after our after our second research trip up to Tyler, where we started getting in touch with some people that didn't make it into the film, but because they were law enforcement officers, so they knew, and the prosecutors knew that we were contacting people that, if they decided to go on the record, would be very bad.
Yeah.
And so Barrett and we're doing this at night in East Texas. We're driving in the middle of the country and watching cop cars go by. I mean, this paranoia started to set in, like,
right.
Keep our eye on the hotel room door. I mean,
sure. And we always had drugs with us, so that was also another reason why. I'm kidding, we didn't have that. Maria did, but that was on the second part. I'm just kidding around. I'm just joking. I will say, can I say that too? There's I remember that because there was I'm looking in the rearview mirror, right, and the car's coming. But again, when you were saying things like could they have done this? Because there's guilty by association, being poor, being blue collar, being working class, and having all these. And they all went to prison. It's like, could they have possibly done it? But then when you actually talk to them, there's a real sense of like, try. You just kind of get to know. I mean, again, you don't know what in someone's past is. Maybe who knows, like some of the things they could have maybe did or didn't do. But when you have Thad Davidson saying things like, "This is a case about pure evil," and he's talking about the actual court system, about the lawyers, about the people that put them in prison. That's where I think the paranoia comes from. That, you know what I mean? It's like if somebody comes at you with a knife and says, "I'm going to stab you," you just run away. If it's a cop or police, or if it's somebody in the judicial system, that's where it gets extremely scary. Especially now when you see what's happening, all across the country with police brutality and whatnot. But I tell you, what's interesting too is talking to the proprietor of the Swingers Club. What was the actual name of the Swingers Club? What did they call it? It was the Mineola Swingers Club, I guess. The Retreat, right? You have an expectation talking to a woman who supposedly ran the Swingers Club, where supposedly all these kids had sex, and in your head you get this idea of what this woman's going to be like. Maybe tall, like she's the maitre d' of like a brothel or something, like tall and husky and sexual and confident. And you meet the lady, and she's like a librarian. She's like your sweet, like your aunt or something, and she's so soft-spoken and incredible. And we're asking her questions, and it's so honest, and her conscience is completely clear because the whole thing is ridiculous. This idea that there was a Swingers Club that had all these horrible things that happened. Like, to her, it's not funny, but it was kind of funny because it's absurd. And just talking to her was illuminating. It's like, wow, what a fascinating thing that we're doing. Like, I remember that interview was in a car. She and I were just sitting beside of each other. Barrett was in the back of the car, feeding us questions and directing us, and it was just fascinating. We talked for 45 minutes about all of her sexual escapades and where the swinger mindset comes from, and it was fascinating. You know what I mean? So the whole movie was an adventure in going into new territory that I've never been in. I mean, I've been to swingers clubs before, obviously. No, I haven't. I haven't done that. But I like that it's legal in Texas. I guess it's legal everywhere, right? Anyway, yeah, so.
Well, I'm kind of curious because when I was watching, I I definitely had my conclusion, which when I read the article, I didn't. Like you said, Michaels doesn't dive into it. It goes on the facts of what he could get hold of. Yeah. You guys do dive in deeper, and like I thought of like the Memphis 3 case, where that seemed absurd when you look at that, and the judicial system completely screwed those fellas over. Like, this screams of that. Yeah. Was there always that pride in that you guys are making a movie that very much could help people down the road, or at least give some type of closure, comfort, something after the horrendousness of being labeled, being pointed at, being, you know, ostracized by a community, by a state? I mean, it's kind of crazy that you guys are giving us something that might make people actually gain something from this whole situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, you know, an innocent man wrongly accused is the plot line for half the movies half the dramas that have ever been produced in Hollywood. So there's an immediate draw when you're reading Michael Hall's article that might be what we're dealing with. You know, a lot of innocent people wrongly accused. So that's definitely that was definitely a driving force. But I will say that, you know, like Michael Hall, I don't think when we started this process we were as quick to draw such a strong conclusion as we did when we'd finally finished the film. And that has a lot to do with the developments that were occurring while we were making it. I mean, it was a really strange sort of series of events that occurred once we started looking into this. I mean, you know, the fact that we were able to film the foster mother losing her foster children. I mean, that was a huge development in the case, and that happened the week we were shooting the documentary. We did not plan for that at all. Bernd had received a phone call the day before we went up to begin that shoot from the DA of the county next to Smith County, saying that, oh, you know, I can't believe that you're actually coming up here to shoot this because there's a major break in the case. The foster mother's going to lose her children. So you lose the very foster children that were at the center of this case. Yeah. So once we heard that, then we started to, you know, walk with a little bit more, you know, assurance.
Yeah, I was blown away. Like, you know, the entire time we were shooting the documentary stuff, Barrett was worried about how, you know, because it was all an experiment. Who thinks so many things could go wrong, and he's weaving a story as we're in real time. So he was always worried about how am I going to finish this thing. And you know, if you create, you know, this woman Margie Cantrell, who is ultimately the villain of the movie, even though she doesn't have a chance to defend herself, but we gave her plenty of chances to have an interview to say, look, come clean. When you have ultimately, the court case that decides that her kids are going to be taken away, and that is kind of like, it's a great way to close the movie, because ultimately she is probably sociopathic and probably dangerous. You know, again, we can't definitively. Maybe it's a very idyllic home. Baron, can I talk about your actual interview with Margie that never made it on camera, or no? No, there's no reason to talk about that. I shouldn't talk about that because, but anyway, yeah, it was nice that I just repeated what you said, which was fantastic. Though I remember us feeling that it was a boon. It was very, very advantageous that happened. You know, that we were actually able to go to a court hearing that actually decides the fate of her kids, basically the foster kids that she was taking care of. Beautiful way to close the movie, and we do kind of close the movie that way. That's the documentary end of it. It's how it's closed. And then what's so brilliant, because then you guys, when we shot the narrative stuff, you write the stuff about me going to jail and Bobby Mims coming to get me, and then him explaining to me what's happening in the car as we're driving there. It's very, very clever, you know, without being cutesy clever, you know.
Yeah, I think it was an adventure, it was an experiment, and it was unpredictable. I'm sure that it was very hard to make that shooting schedule plan, because you didn't know, like, if these people who were planned to be interviewed, are they going to really say yes? Are they going to be there? Are they going to open up? How are we going to do the story? So, and the miracles were happening while we were doing it. Yeah. One of the miracles is really the scene where we got the chance to shoot Margie Cantrell.
And The Miracle of Love, Maria fell in love with Booger Red. It was I'm don't put that in. That sounds like I fell in love with Booger Red, but he's married. Rose, a beautiful Rose, yes. But yeah, The Miracle of filmmaking is always a miracle. It's a miracle we didn't kill each other too. There was times we were all kind of fighting and whatnot. So, but
I'm curious. So let's look at the fact that Austin Film Festival has brought you guys in. They obviously have a strong relationship. But the fact that it's a writers' festival and this is such a unique writing adventure. This isn't your typical story. I think it's bold of Harrison and the team to make you guys one of the focus films. Can you talk about being accepted to AFF and why that's important? It is kind of home turf for a majority of the people in the team, but it's also, there's something special to the fact that this is such a unique hybrid, and they're concentrating on the writing process, which must have been crazy for you guys to get this focused.
Yeah, I think it's storytelling, whether it's documentary or fiction. So yeah, I feel really comfortable here. It's not your typical screenplay. It's not your typical film. But the writing process was unique and long and different. So yeah, I think this is a good home for this film. And on top of the fact that as a writer, I think it's one of my favorite it's probably my favorite festival. I love AFF.
What I loved about, in terms of, from the perspective of being on the outside, I had nothing to do with the writing process, but you guys, it was very dynamic script. Even though, it would change, you guys would come in with pages and say, we've changed things here and there. So every day the script kind of changed and morphed into something kind of new, which was very exciting, to me. I loved all that stuff, When
I was reading it for the first time, there was more of a narrative story in the script than documentary parts. Documentary parts were improvs, and before I wasn't familiar with the case when I was reading it, so I knew more about the narrative story than about the documentary part, and that's something that we didn't know how we're gonna do it, and actually Bernd and Johnny obviously knew, but I think it was an interesting writing process for them and also for us as actors to read it and then to make it and change it every day, and they were open to listen to us as well, and they were just great. Johnny is a writer and Bernd is a filmmaker. I was impressed with all of them, how skillful, talented, really film-loving people. They were so into it that it just made me feel great about my profession.
I want to add one thing about Austin Film Festival. I premiered a movie here 14 years ago called Ding-a-Lingless in 2001, and had an incredible time. So it's really cool to be back here because all the panels and whatnot were terrific. And that was also before Shane Black did Iron Man 3, so he was much cooler and nicer and accessible than he is now. I'm kidding around. I never got a chance to talk to him then, and I wouldn't be able to talk. I wouldn't talk to him now because I'm above the guy. But still, it's cool that he comes back every year, and that it's just an amazing panel. Here's the cool thing too about this whole group is a lot of writers can be very self-important and full of themselves. And I think the self-importance on this movie was replaced by, there was a self-importance, but it also came with the idea that we were doing something good. We were trying to give voice to the marginalized and the poor and giving them a chance to tell their story. And that felt good. Anytime you feel good about making a film and you feel like you are kind of, there is the existential crisis of why make art? Is it helping anyone? And in this sense, it literally was. This is helping, starting with Michael Hall's article and weaving itself into, to the film itself was, I think it's impactful. Even if no one sees the film, and hopefully a lot of people will see it, I just think it made a difference to the people who actually went to prison. Even Dennis Pittman, who is sitting in prison now, I'm sure just the chance for him to tell his story probably was somewhat vindicating, I'm assuming. He's still in prison, so I'm sure it's awful. But anyway, that's why I feel really lucky to be part of it, you know what I mean? So.
Can y'all talk about last night and about being able, because sadly I had to watch it on a screener. I didn't get the impact of being in the theater, getting the emotion of the audience and them cluing into what you guys have shown us about this crazy case and about your great performances. What was it like last night for you guys?
Well, I mean, first of all, it was a packed screening,
Yeah.
and it was a great audience. There was a lot of energy in the audience while the film was on, but the Q&A was kind of lived up to its billing, I thought, because we brought in a bunch of the defendants showed up to watch it. A lot of the lawyers showed up, and they were part of the Q&A at the end, and you could tell that they were really happy to have that stage, and to be able to kind of tell their little bit of the story to a movie-going public or any public, just to have their voices heard. On top of the fact that we tried our very best to make sure their voices were heard in the film itself. But yeah, the Q&A was kind of a riot, and it was exciting, real exciting.
That's what I think is interesting.
Possibly one of the better Q&As of all time.
It was really intense. We talk about giving the voice to the 6 people who were arrested, but I think another amazing thing that was showcased in the Q&A last night was it let the lawyers get a chance to be seen and revisit their passion and anger for the case. You know what I mean? And last night on stage, I think after they saw the film, those emotions were right at the surface, and they brought all of it back, all of the passion and rage, especially with Thad Davidson and Bobby Mims. Yeah. And it was amazing to watch that. It was incredible.
Yeah, and also just to witness that, if you speak to these lawyers, they're criminal defense lawyers, and they're all very cynical, and they're like, all of our clients are guilty. We're just trying to give them the representation they need, so that they don't get totally screwed over or railroaded.
Maybe
but they're like,
supposed to say
what?
Maybe the older defendants are.
No. But what I'm saying is they're kind of realistic about things.
Yeah.
Not on this case, and you saw it last night in that Q&A. They are fired up about this because they know that that their clients are innocent. Yeah. So you see all of these lawyers getting really emotional, getting angry, getting sad. Yeah, I don't think I expected that.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, it was a great way to finish off. Yeah.
Well, I was really kind of blown away by the movie, and I'm curious to see what's the next step. Obviously, other festivals maybe, but where can people find out more about it? Tell us where, because this is something that I think impacts the whole state. I think it's very strong to that, but it could go outside of the state and really impact a lot of people. Mm-hmm. How can people find out more about Booger Red?
Well, I mean, we've got the social media squared away. I think boogerredfilm.com. That's our website. And then you can find us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. But I mean, and we're getting a lot of great press. I think the local outlets and regional outlets have really got on board with this project. It's a fascinating case, and there's lots to write about. So it's going to have a life of its own after this, and obviously we're going to. It's got a festival life ahead of this. So. Yeah.
And the case, the movie's it's bookended with Dennis Pittman in prison, and he's the last of the 6 people who served jail time, and he's still in jail. So it's like, The 7th. There's 7, right? He's the 7th, so I apologize. So he's still in prison. So it's like, this story isn't really over yet, because I feel like until he gets out, you know what I mean? The story's really not finished.
As far as the case goes. If it would be great. I think one of our sort of goals is to try and get Dennis Pittman a new hearing, or try and draw attention to the case in such a way that we can force someone's hand up there. But also, it's important that the defendants who did get out are exonerated. Most of the people involved in this case, I think they realize that. There's not much to it. Well, if that's the case, then they deserve an exoneration. They deserve a clean record. And of course, then there's public opinion. Up in East Texas, they're still looked upon as guilty, just because they haven't been able to sort of air their side of the story. So we're hoping that this film starts that.
Yeah, I think that this movie provokes many, many questions about the law system, about the foster system, and I think definitely it involves audience into a dialogue and questions. So we would really like to that this movie speaks to the audience and that something good is going to come out of it.
Well, I definitely agree with you guys, and thank you guys for bringing this film, and it was a real pleasure to
Thanks for
watch
having
it.
us.
Thank you guys.
Thanks a lot.